The war began back on February 28th. A ceasefire, brokered by Pakistan, started on April 8th, which led to high-stakes talks, but those talks collapsed. In retaliation, Iran reclosed the Strait of Hormuz, bringing us right to this very moment.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the immediate deadline. Then, we'll dive into the single biggest roadblock, what we're calling the 15-year disagreement. After that, we'll explore why the Strait of Hormuz is so incredibly important, what all of this could mean for us here at home, and finally, we'll lay out the 3 most likely futures we're facing.
Let's start with the urgent situation right now. The clock is ticking down to the ceasefire's expiration, and the entire world is watching, holding its breath to see if diplomacy can pull us back from the brink.
So the conflict itself, a US-led air campaign called Operation Epic Fury, lasted for 40 days of intense airstrikes. That ceasefire on April 8th was supposed to be a bridge to a lasting peace. But after 21 straight hours of negotiations went nowhere, the United States responded by putting a full naval blockade in place. Iran's move was just as fast and just as serious. They reclosed the Strait of Hormuz, a massive escalation just days before this deadline.
Now, this is where it gets serious. We need to look at the real reason those peace talks failed. It wasn't about a laundry list of complicated issues. No, it all came down to a single, fundamental disagreement, one that can be boiled down to a single number.
This is the key question, isn't it? After all that effort, all those hours behind closed doors, why did both sides just walk away from the table? The answer is both incredibly simple and profoundly difficult.
And here it is. This is the heart of the matter. The United States put a demand on the table. A 20-year ban on all Iranian uranium enrichment. 2 full decades. Iran's counteroffer? 5 years. And that was it. That single point is where 21 hours of diplomacy came to a dead stop.
And that brings us to the most important number in this entire crisis. 15. 15 years. That is the gap between the two sides. 15 years is the distance that currently separates a fragile peace from a return to all-out war.
Now, to really grasp the weight of this disagreement, we need to quickly understand what we're talking about. Uranium enrichment is basically a process of concentrating a specific isotope, U-235. At low levels, say 3 to 5%, it's perfect for fueling a civilian nuclear power plant. But if you get it all the way up to 90%, well, that's weapons-grade material.
So what's the reality on the ground? Before the war, Iran was already enriching uranium to 60% purity. Now, that's a level that has no real civilian use. They also have a stockpile of about 400 kilograms of this material. So the American demand isn't just to stop enriching, it's also to hand over that entire stockpile and to dismantle the facilities that made it.
But if you look at it from Iran's point of view, this isn't just about centrifuges, it's about national sovereignty. An Iranian official put it bluntly to CNN, saying that handing over their enriched uranium is a non-starter. For them, the nuclear program is a symbol of their scientific progress, and they argue they'll never accept being treated as an exception from international law.
Okay, so this might seem like a regional fight, but it has massive global implications. And the main economic battleground is a tiny stretch of water that is absolutely vital to the entire global economy.
Think about this, roughly 20%, 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply has to pass through this narrow choke point. So when it gets shut down, the ripple effects are felt everywhere, in every country, mainly in the price you and I pay for energy.
And this isn't some abstract economic problem. It has a real human cost. Right now, as we speak, there are an estimated 20,000 sailors stranded on hundreds of ships stuck in the Gulf, unable to go anywhere. It's a logistical nightmare and a growing humanitarian crisis.
Iran has been very clear about its strategy here. On April 18th, their National Security Council said, and I'm quoting, "It is impossible for others to pass through the Strait of Hormuz while we cannot." In other words, if their ships are blocked by the US Navy, then nobody's ships are getting through. It's a strategy of mutual economic destruction.
This all brings the crisis right back to our doorstep. The fallout from this standoff isn't going to stay in the Middle East. It's set to be felt directly, right here in the United States.
The first and most obvious impact will be at the gas pump. Analysts are forecasting that if war resumes, the price of Brent crude oil could spike to between $130 and $150 a barrel. And you can be sure that a spike like that translates directly to higher gas prices for all of us.
And it's not just gas prices. The financial markets would feel it too. You see, the recent ceasefire created a wave of optimism that actually pushed the S&P 500 to record highs. If conflict starts again, it would almost certainly trigger a sharp reversal. hitting retirement accounts, 401ks, and the country's overall economic confidence.
So with the deadline just hours away, we're really looking at 3 distinct possibilities. Let's walk through each one.
Okay, scenario 1, and what most people think is the most likely, is that they just extend the ceasefire, kick the can down the road for another 30 or 60 days to keep talking. Scenario 2, this is the best case but also the least probable. A deal is actually reached. They somehow find a compromise in that 15-year gap. And then there's scenario 3, the war resumes. Airstrikes would restart and the economic shocks would be immediate. And the likelihood of this worst-case scenario, it goes up with every single hour that passes.
Which brings us right back to the number that has come to define this whole crisis. 15 years. That's the chasm that diplomacy is now trying to cross. 20 years demanded, 5 years offered.
Over the next 24 hours, here are 4 signals you should be watching for. First, is there any official confirmation of a second round of talks? Second, watch Iran's navy. Do they change their posture in the strait? Third, keep an eye on oil prices in real time. The market will tell you what it thinks is going to happen. And finally, watch the other fragile ceasefire, the one in Lebanon. If that breaks, it could be a sign of a much wider conflict to come.
So a ceasefire that was supposed to be a pathway to peace has now become a countdown to a critical decision. It leaves us with one final question. Do you think the ceasefire will be extended, or will the conflict resume? Tomorrow we'll all find out the answer.